In this video, you are going to master the Danish Gambit, which can help you crush newbies right start from the opening. So let's start. So we are playing with the white pieces and we start the game with 1 e4. Opponent plays e5 and already on the move number 2, we play the move d4, striking in the center. Black happily captures the pawn, expecting us to capture the pawn back with the queen. But instead we push the pawn to c3, allowing our opponent to capture the pawn, and here at the place of capturing the pawn on c3, we play the move bishop to c4, simply developing the pieces. Our opponent gets greedy and even captured the third pawn on b2. We capture the pawn back and here we have the position. We are already 2 pawns down, but instead we got a huge amount of development. After bishop into b2, I have taken 3 moves into consideration, which is bishop to b4 check, knight to f6, or even d6 in this position. First, let's try to discuss what happens if the opponent goes with d6. After d6, it makes sense black is chopping white's e5 push and also trying to open up the bishop. So after d6, we play the move knight to f3, focusing on developing the piece. Black plays knight to f6, we play the move short castle. And after short castle, black plays bishop to e7. Already if black tries to capture the pawn on e4 in this position, and after knight into e4, we can already play the move rook to e1, trapping the knight. d5, we can simply capture the pawn, and if f5, we can play the move knight d2, capturing the knight, and here black is already completely lost in this position. So going back, that's why bishop to e7, just a safe move trying to do a short castle, which makes the most out of the sense. So after bishop e7, we already strike in the center with e5. Black captures the pawn, and here we play the move queen to b3. So after queen b3, our idea is to simply capture the pawn on f7. So black simply short castle, which makes sense, and now it looks like blacking is extremely safe, so black should be better. But after short castle, we capture the pawn on e5. And after knight into e5, how are you really going to continue the position? After knight into e5, black must play the move queen to e8 because we are already planning to capture the pawn on f7. There's a triple attack on the pawn on f7. So black only moves to play the move queen e8, defending the pawn, but already rook to e1. Putting the rook on the same file as the queen and trying to move the knight and putting pressure on the e file. So after rook e1, I have taken 2 moves into consideration, knight to c6 or knight b to d7. If black continues with knight b to d7, we can already sacrifice on f7, rook f7, bishop f7, queen f7, and already rook into e7. The queen is paralyzed, so he cannot capture the rook because the queen is pinned up. And here after queen trade, we are already an exchange up in completely winning position. You can already sense it. So going back, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays knight b to d7. If your opponent plays knight to c6, we can simply trade off the knight and play the move bishop into f6. Your opponent cannot capture the bishop with the bishop because the queen is hanging. So black is forced to capture with the pawn, but now already knight to d2, bringing the final piece into the game. Knight to d2, black plays bishop f5. We play the move queen f3, bishop to g6, and again somehow it looks like black is somehow holding the position, but already we start to push the h pawn. Our idea is to play the move h5, attacking the bishop, and the bishop is trapped. So the only move is to play the move h5. But now queen to e3 in the position, and our idea is to simply capture the bishop and be a piece up. So black can only try to move the bishop, but now here we play the move queen to h6. And after queen h6, the queen is hanging. So the moment the queen moves, already queen into g6, the pawn cannot capture the queen because the pawn is pinned up and the position is completely winning for white. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays d6. Going back, if your opponent plays the move knight to f6, developing the knight, we play the move e5, bishop to b4 check, bishop to c3, trading off the bishop, and here black is having 2 options. Black can either move the knight back or play the move queen to e7. If black moves back with the knight, already queen to g4, forcing g6, and now queen to f4 in the position. After queen f4, we are already threatening mate in 1. So queen to e7, and now simply knight f3, developing the pieces. Knight to c6, and now already knight to d5, attacking the queen. And also attacking the f7 pawn. So once the queen moves back, we can already play the move knight into c7 check, queen c7, queen into f7, and here we have a mate. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent goes back with the knight. If your opponent brings queen in the game, after queen e7, we can play the move queen to e2 because we cannot capture the knight because the pawn is pinned. So queen e2, and still the knight is hanging. Black is forced to move the knight in this position to g8, and here we can play the move knight to f3, knight to c6, and after knight c6, the position is already better for black you can simply continue the position with short castle. And after short castle, white is having extremely no problems in this position. Knight d5 is coming up, rook d1 or even rook c1, rook d1. White is having a very comfortable position. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays knight to f6. Coming to the main move, what happens if your opponent plays bishop to b4 check, which makes sense. After bishop b4, we play the move knight to c3. And here after knight to c3, black is having two moves. Black can play the move knight to f6 or d6. If black plays knight to f6, we can play the move queen to b3, attacking the bishop and also the pawn on f7. And here black is forced to capture the knight. We take back with the queen. And here black simply short castle. And the moment black short castle, we play the move knight to f3 in this position. Black cannot capture the pawn because it's a mate in 1 on g7. So after knight f3, black plays d6, trying to open up the light square bishop, which makes sense. We simply short castle, bishop to g4, and we play the move knight to g5 in this position. And from here, the real fun is going to begin. After knight g5, our idea is here pretty clear. We want to play queen b3, putting more pressure on the f7 pawn as well as on b7 pawn. So black will try to get rid of it by playing the move h6. But here we are going to play the move f4 in this position, a very strong move. After f4, now black's having two ways. Black can either go for capturing the knight or black can simply focus on developing the piece with knight to c6. If black goes for playing the move knight to c6 in this position, we can go for playing the move queen to g3, attacking the bishop. Our idea is pretty simple. We want to play h3 or even we can think of capturing the knight followed by capturing the bishop. So black would like to simply fall back with the bishop, defending the f7 pawn as well as removing the bishop. So here we play the move e5, which is a very strong move. Takes, the knight is hanging. So the knight falls back. We play the move knight to e6, a very strong move, attacking the rook and the queen. Black is forced to capture the knight kind of, because if queen e7, we can simply play the move bishop a3. And after knight b4, simply knight takes the rook, queen takes, rook f2, followed by simply rook f1 is coming in, and white is completely winning the game. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays queen to e7. If your opponent plays f into e6, capturing the knight, we can play the move bishop into e6, check, bishop f7, rook f7, very strong move, takes, and here rook to f1. The rook is pinned up, so the position is completely winning for white. Queen e7, we simply capture the rook, king h8, bishop g6, the position is completely winning for white. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays knight to c6, not capturing the knight. If your opponent goes for capturing the knight in this position, we simply capture the pawn. The knight is hanging. Knight goes to e8, the only move, because to protect the checkmate on g7. And here we play the move simply g6, pushing up the pawn. And after g6, the f7 is hanging, so you can't do much. Let's take knight to d7 in the position. We simply capture the pawn, king to h8, and already we can simply make queen. Queen takes, and already we have checkmate on g7, which is unstoppable, kind of. So yeah, that's how you can simply win the position if your opponent plays knight to f6 in this position. If your opponent plays the move d6, it's already a bad move. Queen to b3, our idea is pretty clear. The bishop is hanging, and also our idea is to capture the pawn on f7. The only move is to capture the knight. Bishop takes, and still the same threats. We want to capture the f7 pawn as well as the pawn on g7 is hanging. So the position is already collapsing apart for the black side, and the position is already winning from the white side. So that's how you can easily play the Danish Gambit and crush your opponent with the white pieces. Even the club level player will simply fall for it. So that's it for today. You have successfully mastered the Danish Gambit. If you learned anything new today, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. Still, 90% of the viewers have not yet subscribed. You can subscribe, it's free for you, but it helps us to motivate to make videos like this. I'm going to see you soon, so till then stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.